right? I would argue that's just a really good practice. Probably not a good idea to bring up that thing that your partner did that annoyed you last week if you haven't had a snack yet. Like, no, they're not talking about me, right? That's like other white people. That's someone else's problem. Already you're closing off, and that's your ego, right? You're not listening. You're not paying attention. You're defensive. And I'm like, I just love that humanness is beautiful. Your humanness is beautiful. What else? Get to work. We need help. To be honest, we need people in every area right now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the new episode of the Who Would Have Thought podcast. My name is Sasha Lukavchenko. I'm the founder of the Somatic therapy practice. And in this podcast, I'm sitting down with amazing entrepreneurs, founders, therapists, and simply wonderful humans from all walks of life who share with us the real stories beyond the surface level success. Here we go deep in the personal, in their pivots, their failures, and what actually helped and what didn't bring them to where they are now. Today, I'm sitting down with Amalia Sirica, a New York State licensed clinical social worker and writer trained at Duke and New York University with a decade of experience working across crisis care, trauma, addiction, OCD. She's worked with children, young adults, and adults from all walks of life, and recently made the leap from New York to Lisbon, where she continues her practice and her activism. What draws me to Amalia is how she holds two things at once: a deep belief in the value of therapy and a clear-eyed honesty about everything that is broken and how to support people delivering it. She talks about burnout not as a personal failure, but as a systemic one, about the privacy norms that were meant to protect clients and accidentally isolated healers, about graduate schools teaching self-care because they already know the institution will not. And this is a conversation about the cost of caring for others when the system doesn't care for you, and what it takes to keep going anyway with honesty intact. Yeah. Please welcome Amalia.
Hey,
Let's dive in.
thank you, Sasha. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. You have such a wealth of experience and such a wealth of personal insights to share about both the clinical social work in the US and right now as you are settling in Europe. And first, I would love our listeners to get to know you a little bit better. So you started your journey in New York, in Duke for an undergrad and New York University for your master's of social work and a decade of practice in New York. What made you take the leap and come to Lisbon instead?
So I was practicing that time period. I came to Lisbon for the first time in 2021. So that was like 2021, 2022. So that was the pandemic was still going on, but we were starting to reemerge into the world again. And that, I can't speak for every mental health professional during that time period, but for me, that was a very challenging experience. I sometimes will say there wasn't a graduate school course on a global pandemic, right? We were all learning on our feet. And basically, I got very burnt out. I think part of that too was that we were working from home, so we didn't have the social component. And also was doing a lot of activism because of what was happening in the US at that time and what continues to happen in the US. And the combination of those two things, I just hit a wall, and I had to stop working for a little bit. I really needed a break. And my mom, who will probably come up again in this conversation, is a bit of a world traveler, and she grew up all over the place. And we tease her because we say to her that her solution to most things is a voyage. And we were coming here for a family vacation, and she was like, I think you should stay. So they just dropped me off. So Lisbon part one, which was 2021, was really a recovery period for me. Yeah, it was a removal from the intense experience of just, which I still feel and do in different ways now, this desire to help, to be of service to. And thank you for that intro. This is why I feel passionately about supporting the people that are doing the supporting, because I have burnt out several times throughout my career, and that was probably the worst one. So that was how I ended up in Lisbon the first time, was as like almost like a retreat, a recovery to like just get a little bit space and perspective, which is exactly what it gave me.
Beautiful. Yeah, I can understand that this was a lot to be a social worker in the US during that time.
Yeah.
Please walk us through this experience. How did you understand what was going on around you, what we were seeing in the communities that you were supporting,
Yeah.
and what in particular drove this burnout?
Yeah. I can remember I was living in Queens right before the pandemic, which is about an hour away from where I grew up on Long Island. And I just signed a lease and I was really putting down roots. And I very quickly, my mom was watching what was happening in Italy. She was reading both my parents are former journalists, so they're very tapped into the news. And between that and then my knowledge of the systemic challenges in the US, I was like, I'm gonna go to Long Island, right? Like I'm gonna get out of the city. And I had a few people say to me, it's not gonna last that long. It was still that moment where we didn't really understand what was happening. But I had this moment where I was like, our systems don't function well normally, right? In this country. Like we are not prepared for a crisis of this magnitude. And I just knew in my gut that it wasn't good. So I was like, I let go of the apartment and I went and stayed with my parents. And then from there, it was, I had already had some folks I was seeing virtually, but everything went virtual at that point, right? Which was great that we were able to do that because we were able to continue to work with our clients. But I think the downside of that was, yeah, we're having a lot of conversations now about the tech and, right, this sort of, are you getting the same experience, same somatic experience from the virtual work, right? And I think you can, but I think if that's all you're getting, right, which was what most of us were doing because all of us were quarantined at home, I think over time that just starts to wear on you. And even with the activism work, I wasn't able to like go out and protest. I was doing a lot of virtual activism work. And on one hand, I still have some friends on Instagram that I've never met, right? Because I just was like, I have to do something. And this is all I have access to is this kind of virtual experience right now. But I think that combination, it was like this perfect storm. And of the isolation of and I just got to a certain point where I wasn't doing well mentally myself. And so that's how that process happened.
Totally, yeah. Please walk us through what kinds of activism you were still able to do during this time, what were you doing before the pandemic, and what you managed to continue doing during the pandemic with all the virtual tools that were available for you.
Yeah. I think social work as a lens, right, is not that any other sort of path to becoming a therapist is better or worse, but I think social work as a lens, there's this idea from the beginning of people have these systemic challenges and you can't separate that from mental health. It's just not, you can try, but for me, it's like someone coming in and there's these layers, right, of identity that make moving through the world on a day-to-day basis more or less challenging. And that doesn't mean that someone with a different identity doesn't have challenges, but they just don't have they don't have an extra layer on there. So I think what I was able to do was to donate and was also just to try to sit and learn and spread information, because what I think was happening a lot during that time period was there was just like so much being shared and people like there's a lot going on the internet and people, this is right. So I tried really hard to just find people who I felt were really, I honestly spent a lot of time listening to and learning from specifically Black American therapists, because I felt like, okay, we have this connection already professionally. And on top of their amazing sort of clinical training, they also have the lived experience that I don't have. And so I spent a lot of time learning. And then trying to pass that information on through my various social media channels. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
What were the distinct learnings that you extracted from this amazing group of Black American therapists that you didn't necessarily know before, that were surprising for you, that you didn't have direct contact with before?
I think especially because of your somatic background, you'll understand this better than most. But what I realized was there's a difference between understanding something intellectually and the somatic experience of it, right? So understanding that as a white American, right, regardless of how much work I've done throughout my life to try to like counteract the absolute nonsense, right, that is the racial dynamics in the United States, some of that's going to get in there, right? It's just so the first thing is just not like the defensive, right? That automatic, which is somatic, right? Like the automatic sort of like somatic defensiveness. Again, like, no, they're not talking about me, right? That's like other white people. That's someone else's problem. That's like, right? So that's because already you're closing off, and that's your ego, right? You're not listening. You're not paying attention. You're not really holding space for whatever that person is saying to you. You're defensive. So I think it was learning to actually to recognize that that all of us have those triggers in us, right? And how to breathe through them so that someone can share, hey, I didn't like the way you said that, or like, maybe you didn't mean it this way, but there's this undertone of this, and you can receive that and take the feedback and change your behavior as opposed to making it about you, right? Because all of a sudden it changes from this person has been impacted by something I've said, and instead of the focus staying on that, now the focus is my emotion. And now they have to deal with that on top of everything else. So I think that like is really boiled down, but I think that was what I, without realizing it, was trying to do, was to get myself to a place where I could breathe through those things so I could be someone that could just show up in most spaces and not have those emotional reactions when someone shared something that was just their lived experience, and they should be able to do that without worrying about what my emotional response is going to be.
That's beautiful. This is the foundation, isn't it? If you want to support different communities,
Exactly.
we need to hold ourselves
Yep.
and have the tools to be able to ground and show up as the person who is genuinely helpful, not taking everything personally and boiling this within the soup of our own experience.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So
beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah. I would really love to double click a little bit on this, right? Because this is such an important point of how to actually do that. And yes, we speak a lot about nervous system regulation and breathing through this, but what does it look for you on the day-to-day basis when a trigger shows up or something touches you, which activates your defenses?
Yeah.
How do you personally manage this?
I think the first thing is like, and this is a big thing for me in general, and I think a major area of the mental health field that it continues to need so much work. But the first thing I would say is prevention, right? So I know there's a saying in one of the groups I work with, they say HALT, right? Which is hungry, angry, lonely, tired, right? So it's like, that's more in the context of addiction, right? Where it's the idea there is, if you're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, it's probably not a good idea to go into the bar, right? But, right, I would argue that's just a really good practice. Probably not a good idea to bring up that thing that your partner did that annoyed you last week if you haven't had a snack yet. It's to me, a lot of nervous system work, and it's actually one of the reasons I love being around kids and younger people, is because there's not these layers that they're just like, I'm hungry, so scream. You know what I mean? And like, we all scream, but our screams look different as we get older. And it's more socially acceptable for a child to like discharge emotion that way. And then as we get older, that's not like an okay way to emote, right? And all that stuff gets like, so the first thing I would say is just the basics, right? Like, how's your sleep? How's your nutrition, right? When was the last time you got a hug? The like preventative stuff. And then maybe the triggers come, but they don't hit as hard, right? Whereas I think if over time, it's when we're not watching out for that stuff that something comes in and it just all of a sudden you're fine and then you're not. But if you trace it back, it's like, okay, like I haven't had good sleep in a couple of days and actually like, so that's, and then in terms of concrete practices, I think, yeah, for sure. I think meditation for me is, it's almost annoying how well meditation, right? Because I always say it doesn't come naturally to me. And I hear people say a lot, oh, my mind is too busy to meditate. And I forget where I read this, but I read once that meditation is not like more effective if your mind is quiet, right? Like it really is just, even if your mind chats the whole time, they've still shown that it has efficacy. So I tell people that too. It's really the act of sitting, right? Or so it's sitting's too hard, take a walk, right? Something I used to do with my folks that were working through obsessive compulsive disorder, I would have them do these things called observation walks. Is what I noticed with OCD and with anxiety, but like particularly with OCD, it's like constant meaning making, right? So that person put a period instead of an exclamation point on that text message. That means that thing I said 2 days ago upset them and they're just not telling me. So the practice of observation and then not analyzing. So like tree, man wearing a pink shirt, blue shoes, right? And it's a mindfulness practice, but it's also this practice of like when you have a hyper analytical mind, practicing just witnessing. So
This is fascinating to me. Thank you so much for sharing this, because as a clinical social worker, you are working with multiple communities and the really big systemic issues that are not necessarily within our control, but we have the direct impact on them. Yet your daily practice is very personal and very grounded in very basic, you can say, but I would also say foundational things, which are our body and our nervous system and how we get affected by the larger issues that we cannot control directly is related to how well we're regulating on the day-to-day, minute by minute. And the fact that you brought the HALT, so hungry, angry, lonely, and tired, this is incredible. And how we have this experience as kids, it doesn't go away, right? It just continues whether we're aware of it or not. And if we're aware, we're much better off because we can satisfy our own needs and then show up in these communities for these bigger challenges as a better person. Because guess what? We're all humans with the same nervous system.
Yeah. And then there's the trauma therapist layer of me, right? Which is, yes, we all have the same nervous system, but literally, and this is where my social work stuff comes in, literally purely because of the identity that you were born into, right? Your nervous system has had challenges that this other person's nervous system hasn't, right? And so it's like all of those things for me exist together, right? Which is all of us acknowledging our personal struggles and what we need to do to care for ourselves. And then also acknowledging, hey, I don't have this extra challenge, right? Because to me, that's acknowledging privilege, right? It's not necessarily, I don't think, shaming ourselves. I don't think, and I think you probably, shame is not a super effective tool. At least I have not found it to be a super effective tool. But the acknowledgement of, I do have these challenges. I'm honoring that. I have compassion for myself. And I haven't had X, Y, and Z on top of it because of these identities and because of the systemic injustice. And it's hard sometimes to like let all that exist together, but it does.
Yeah. I love that you're bringing this up because I feel like social work has a very distinctive lens compared to psychotherapists or psychologists who are often trained to just look at symptoms, right? Or just look at what specific actions you can take in this particular situation, but miss the wider perspective that you have. And what do you think are the typical things that psychologists or psychotherapists without necessarily this wider lens can miss in their private practice?
I think maybe I'll give an example because it's something I was having a conversation. I have this friends that are a little younger than me, or even sometimes like more online than me. So it's like they also talk to me about some of the trends. And I have this like sort of cheeky joke where I'm, like the internet has discovered psychology in like the last 5 years, maybe 10. Which on one hand, I'm like, oh, yay, right? Because it's so much more normalized, like stigma lift. And on the other hand, my fear is a little bit around we're not we're using these words. So I think as a writer also, or as someone who really loves words and like linguistics, I'm like, we're losing the plot a little bit, right? We're diagnosing like our friends. So I think an example I end up talking about personality disorders a lot because I feel like they're an interesting focus point for this question. And I'll just use borderline personality disorder as an example, right? And there's just all kinds of stuff of that. Folks that are in early recovery for addiction often meet criteria for borderline personality disorder. People that have chronic PTSD, autistic women get misdiagnosed with borderline. So to me, those are the blind spots, right? Okay, you're not taking into account like, yeah, okay, this person's nervous system is very dysregulated and they're behaving in X, Y, and Z way. But you're not taking into account maybe the trauma they've experienced or what they've been through or like just the bigger picture. Like I worked with teenage girls. One of my first jobs out of graduate school, I worked with teenagers who by age 11, 12 had been through more in that short period of time than most adults, right? Probably most of them would have met the criteria for some kind of personality, something going on. It's trauma.
Yeah.
So that is where I think the pure clinical lens can miss the mark.
Yeah. Totally. And I can also stand on my soapbox regarding this because I see in psychopharmacology, it's all very focused on the giving a specific diagnosis based on the X signals. Like you show this symptom 3 times a week for 6 months, that means that you have X disorder.
Exactly.
So it's very specific. But even now, when we speak more about trauma and we start understanding more about how trauma actually operates, people still miss this important lens that this is the human perfectly normally going through the very difficult time in a perfectly normal way, how their body is supposed to work and supposed to recover. And it doesn't mean that they have this disorder in the label for life and need to take these pills for the rest of their life. And this alone can be traumatizing for so many people, just having the diagnosis of, let's say, borderline personality disorder, which is supposed to not treatable, right, for the whole life. So, and you're taking the meds for the rest of your life. And for some people, it can be empowering to have the diagnosis and be like, okay, I know how to deal with this. Right. But for some, it can also be a traumatic experience in itself, as in, okay, I will never recover from this. Getting into the victim position. And here is where for me it gets really important to speak about the system that supports these people and doesn't support in this sense.
Exactly.
Because not always do we have amazing social workers, right, and the psychotherapists who see the human as a whole and acknowledge the whole diversity of their experiences and the depths of their challenges. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience of working in a system with these vulnerable communities and individuals?
Yeah, I was also going to say too, just before I forget, to your point about the people holding the space. People don't always start out that way. They get burnt out, they get jaded, that's the other thing, right? Is like most of us start out very hopeful and like idealistic and excited. And like, I remember I was 24 when I graduated from graduate school. And I remember that the energy I had and the fight. I'm like, oh man, that version of me. No, and like, I love her and I love this version of me too, but it's also like, it takes a toll on you, right? So I also feel like it's important because I think there's a lot of conversations that happen about sort of mental health professionals maybe that just seem a little tapped out. And I get that we need to take responsibility for that. But I feel like the part of it that's missed, the part of the conversation that's missing is like, how does that happen? Right? People are put through the ringer working in these systems and they get tired. So yeah, just that was something that came up when you said that. Can you ask me one more time the last question?
Yes, of course. So what was your experience of working with these vulnerable communities in the system and how did you see the system supporting or not supporting these communities and then yourself specifically?
Smiling because I'm thinking about those first couple of jobs, which were my teen years, I call them, which was my 2 internships were with teenagers and then the first 3 or 4 years of my career. So it's like, a good chunk of my clinical experience came from working with children and families. which I actually think was like a great foundation and was definitely never boring. I don't know if you've ever seen those like Sour Patch Kid commercials. It's like first they're sour, then they're sweet. And it's like, that's what I would call my, because it would be like, I'd be getting screamed at 1 minute and then I'd be getting like hugged. And it's because, and like what I had to always remind myself, it was because these were not young people that always had the safest adult relationships. And they felt that they could just fully express for better or for worse. And that was a role I took seriously. And throughout the entirety of my career, what I can tell you is what sticks out is the people that I work, not the people I was working with necessarily, but like my colleagues, just the people that just really beautiful, big-hearted, like tough, people who've been in this field for a long time, like a lot of people, a lot of mentors. I was very lucky to end up working with a lot of mental health professionals that were just really good at what they did. And to me, the good part of the system is the people working in the system. I misquote it, but there's something that's about like activism should be like a choir, right? So that like when someone needs a rest, like a couple of people can drop out and then like you don't really notice because everybody's singing and then you come back in and then someone else takes the break. And that, yeah, when I was working in more of those agency settings, like I did actually feel that sense of community and like camaraderie more. And yeah, that's what I can say is there's a lot of people working within these systems that really have the best interests of the clients in mind and really care. So
Beautiful. You've also talked about this paradox at the heart of it all, which is there are privacy norms that protect these vulnerable communities, and the system does its best in its current state to make sure that they do not get overly abused by their therapists, that we have all the information necessary about these people on file so that we can treat them. And you mentioned that it's very important for these kids that you were working with to have the secure adult next to them. And the system can be like one of the pillars that kind of also supports and protects this, just in case there may be some misalignment or mistreatment on the side of a human. So the system does do a lot of things, but at the same time, what did you see in your personal practice were negative effects of the same norms? What was on the other side of a spectrum that maybe was not supporting you as a therapist in that sense, was not supporting these communities?
Yeah, it's hard because I don't know, like I think I sometimes shy away from voicing some of this because I don't have a good solution yet, right? And I'm part of, and I don't know, maybe that's my therapist brain, but there's part of me is like, if you're gonna talk about the solution. But I think this is how we figure the solution is having these conversations. So I'm trying to just get over that and be like, this is my take, and let's all try to come up with something together.
If you did have a solution, that would be like a very impressive, bombastic podcast, which would right now resolve all the systemic issues in the social work in the US and Europe. Guys, prepare.
A good point. We're gonna stay. There's another saying in addiction recovery where they say staying right-sized, right? Which is just, this is what I can control. This is what, but it's hard. It's hard when you, it is hard when you study systems because you really see like all the issues and you're just like, why can't we say God, like, Anyway, I honestly think from a place of love that I do think that we're doing our absolute best to care for the people that we're caring for. So the thing, and you and I've had many conversations about this, but I just keep having this feeling. There was this report that came out about they did a lot of surveys about the state of mental health. And they found that, and this is not the first time that this has been found, but they found that like some of the wealthier countries, right, monetarily, are doing the worst mental health wise. And there was this one line that I just was, it was like we're pouring all this money into mental health care and it's not moving the needle. And that just made me think, what are we spending this money on? And then the only thing I can think of is in part, I know you're not asking the clinicians, because if you were asking the clinician, like something wouldn't be moving. And then also, are you taking care of us? I just know that answer is no. And I don't know exactly what we need. I don't even know if we know what we need because people don't ask us that much. People ask me what I need. I'm like, it's just so that's our work to do.
Yeah.
But I just feel like there's a really big gap in the way that the helpers are being supported. And I don't mean just there. Oh my God, Sasha, the medical folks during the pandemic. I'm like, there have been multiple times since then. I'm like, is anyone checking on that? Right before trauma? Like, are they okay? Right? They probably just had to go right through. So it's not, it's nurses, it's teachers, it's therapists, it's anyone it's the space holders. We need help.
Yeah.
We need help.
Yeah. And we're not trained during our university degrees, during bachelor's and master's, postgrads to really take care of ourselves first. God forbid we learn these tools that we started speaking about like breathing and grounding,
yoga,
somatic stuff, yes, yoga, pranayama, all this basic and foundational things. Have you eaten? Have you slept today on your 48-hour shift?
Are you taking breaks between your clients? And not doing your notes because that doesn't count as a break, but you need to do your notes.
Yes.
So it's like you're constantly being told this, but then you're constantly getting like the reverse in action.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself, but also do this.
Yeah. And that's also an interesting layer because what I'm really curious about is what made you originally to choose this difficult profession, which is so vulnerable and helps so many different communities, but it's extremely hard. Right?
Yeah, it's tough. It's not, it's beautiful work, but it's definitely not easy. The first thing, and this is like I said, okay, probably my family was going to come in again, but I always joke like my grandfather was a judge. Both my parents are journalists. My brother's a lawyer. I'm a social worker, right? Like we don't like gray area. And we're like, this is right and this is wrong. And like, of course, some of my adult work has been working with nuance, but ultimately, I just was raised in a family that was very much from a very young age. My mom started pointing out to us, this is nonsense, right? Like this, we're not going to just accept this. This person is not, like you're being told that this person being treated this way is okay because they hold this identity. And that's insane. And it's true. That's insane. That's like an insane teaching. So I think it was just, yeah, I've had that. There's stories of me as a kid, right? I did my first communion, but I didn't get confirmed because I had a lot of friends who were Jewish. I didn't like the way the Catholic was like not including, but so I was like 11. So I've always had this kind of like, no, that's wrong. And we have to do something about it. Yeah. And then I studied, and I've always loved people. That's just from the time I was small. My mom always says, if you're friends with Amalia, you're a friend for life. Seen people and seen their real selves. Just like, you're a little cranky today. I love you anyway. Not love just because when you're perfect. And I actually think that to me, it's so funny because people will be like, oh my God, I'm sorry. I'm like, this is to me, this is like our most lovable state because it's real. It's honest and it's like, it's okay. It's great. Like, ugh, the polished stuff is like, we have enough of that. We don't need more of that. So I think those combinations of things, like the love for people and then this just really strong inner sense of justice that I've just always had. And that was what led to social work. I actually didn't have the clinical in mind. I was pulled to social work really more from the place of the activism and the community organizing. I'm also a nerd. And I was really type A when I was younger, and I was very achievement focused. And so I was like, well, yeah, of course I'm going to get my clinical license. That's like the cool thing. Like that's like the A+. So, but the heart of it is actually the activism and the community building. That's like what really pulled me to social work.
It's amazing. Yeah. The more I speak with psychologists and psychotherapists and social workers that chose this difficult path, the more I realize that you only go there from the place of deep inner drive, that you want to change something, you want to help people. And that is why you learn the difficult tools to expand your capacity to hold space for all the vulnerable communities, even if your own background is more of a privileged background of like a white woman in the US, etc. So this is amazing to have in this space also yourself as this person who is really just striving to change the world for the better.
Yeah, and I think now what's nice is at this stage of life, it's also okay, and can that exist with us also doing well, right? And us having financial success. So I do think a dark side of social work is that there's a bit of martyrdom mixed in there. Almost this idea of sort of like money is bad, right? Because of the systems, right? And because of what capitalism has done and because of like, right? Like, but then I keep saying to people, I'm like, but then those of us who want to do good things, and like that means that we don't have the funds, we don't have the resources, we don't have, because we're keeping ourselves down here because we feel like it's almost like the noble thing to do. So I think at this stage of my life, it's also trying to figure out. And also, I don't know if you got these messages growing up, but I definitely got these messages of like, either you're doing good, right? You're working in a nonprofit, or you're financially successful. And you can't have both. And I'm like, God, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, so it's also deprogramming some of that. And I think it's also why a lot of people end up going into private practice, because that's where we're told where you can have financial success as a therapist. And I also am like, is that the only way? I don't know. So it's just all those questions also.
Yeah. This is also something that makes me so sad and angry at the same time, that if we want to help communities at a larger scale, and we're here training for multiple years, expanding our capacity, learning all these tools, and we're ready to go support them, then the systems don't support us.
Exactly. Yeah. And then people burn out and people leave the field, and then you lose incredibly talented professionals because it's not sustainable. That word has come up a lot recently for me. It's just this idea of how to make this work sustainable for people so that they can keep doing it, because we need us more than ever right now.
Yeah. And what's the scale of the sentiment among social workers, among psychotherapists that you spoke with?
Yeah, I don't know a ton who have like actually left the field, right? Or there's a few. I want to say everyone has thought about it though. Like, it's like, wow. And everyone's a broad term, but like I do think there's this general sentiment of we're tired, we're exhausted, like we're carrying too much. That to me, like the energy of this is too much for just me. Yeah. Like I could do it in a team or in a community, but yeah. And that also, that this kind of choice between working in a team and working in an agency and then private practice and like better finances and better flexibility, right? Like that also I see is a struggle, because I do think it's, and I know we've talked about this, I don't think it's natural is maybe a strong word, but I do feel like this work is meant to be done in community. Like the helpers need to be in community. And when you have to choose private practice or financial, like that, it's just a tough like break, it feels like, having to make the choice between those two things. So that's why I think why some people start private practice, they'll do group practice, which I think is great.
What do you think in an ideal world the infrastructure for this supportive system would look like?
Well, the closest I think I've ever come to experiencing it was I worked at there was a psychologist in New York who started a collective, and it was like a little group of therapists. And then there was also like a couple of acupuncturists. It was like a little yoga studio, and it was great. And it felt very holistic and very focused on combining all of our skills together and supporting each other. There was also a grant involved, so all the therapists were given. We had basically like a mini yoga teacher training with a really wonderful teacher. So we had yoga, and then they went on a retreat at one point. Everything was covered. And then what was really cool was that part of the grant was that we were paid, and I think it was enough to see like 5 clients for free. And that, I remember it, probably if anybody that I've ever worked with came up to me, I would remember them. You know what I mean? Like, I think everyone's in there somewhere. But these folks in particular, because the feeling of ease of I'm taken care of financially, and they're not stressed about how to pay, those therapeutic relationships, they hadn't, like, it was just like, it just, that's the noise. And I'm just like, what, how do we, like, I should be well taken care of and they should be well taken care of. And then all we have to do is focus on what's actually important, which is them and helping them heal.
It's amazing. In that little community, where did this grant come from?
It's a good question. And that is something I would have to ask. A lot has happened since then. I don't think it was governmental though. I think it was like maybe a private like donor. But yeah, I've thought about that a lot. Maybe grants or something, like you create a program. And to me, I guess what it comes down to is what we're doing and what our clients are doing is already so hard, right? And can be so heavy, right? And so important that there should be as little other stress as possible.
Yes.
Like they should be able to show up. I should be able to show up. We can have a whole conversation about notes. That's a whole different. Someone take that away. I don't want to look at a note ever again. You know, but it's that kind of stuff. It's just like, and I feel a little bit when I teach yoga, right? Show up, teach the class, you're holding the space, they're just showing up. There's still payment involved, but like, and you're just like, and it's just, yeah, like I don't know how to create that. That's the somatic energy of it. It's just this ease around the experience. The experience itself has already got its challenges.
The deep exhale. And the more I'm speaking with my clients, the more I realize that as they're going through the difficult experience, they may not be able to make money either.
Yeah, exactly.
So what happens in the majority of cases is that they don't have money to pay, so they stop therapy.
Yep.
In the most vulnerable moment where they need it the most.
Yep.
So what is the structure that can support the therapist to still provide these services to help these people come out of the situation?
Exactly.
And maybe at some point they will repay. Maybe they'll never repay. But it doesn't matter because
or they'll pay it forward, or there's like some kind of structure that they can like support someone else in getting a session in the future that is also it's just
Exactly. What some of the ways that I've been thinking is to set the price which would be reachable for the specific population, right, which would be, for example, higher than average, and then use this people who can pay right now the service to then pay forward to the people who cannot, right, pro bono. So basically you're elevating a little bit the price from the medium, and then you're able to finance those who are really struggling at the moment. And that's something that I've been doing in my personal practice as well, and it's been working well so far. But the thing is that what I see on the market also right now of the therapists is that the general price keeps elevating, and then there is more and more people who just look at these prices advertised in the website and be like, I cannot afford this.
Can't afford that. Yeah.
So how do we make it really clear that there is a sliding scale, that there is a pro bono option, that price must not be a barrier for people who really struggle at the moment?
No, I think these are all really important questions, and I think are on a lot of people's minds. And I think that, and I think ultimately it's how can everyone be supported, right? Like, it's like really the question. Both, and this is, I think you do this work too, right? And so I think I'll speak in the and not necessarily a good thing, right? And something also that I think as practitioners we have to work on. If I have a session scheduled, whatever's going, I'm going to show up, right? I'm going to show up. I'm going to be as present as possible. I'm going to do my best. But we all know, all of us, the difference between a session when we're good and when we've got something, and that I think that's a level of self-honesty. So it's like, to me, it's the same argument as there's these studies of mental health in children. Number one indicator of mental health in children, mom's mental health. So we're focused on the kid because I'm mom, right? And that's my same thing with, I know that most of us can work through a lot of different circumstances and still hold space and still be amazing therapists, right? But the question is like, what impact is that having on us, right? Over time. And then the other question is, why should we have to do that? Right? If we just had the support we needed. And if this is why I just feel like it's the most effective focus Because I just know with me or with you or with anyone that has a personality like us or is in any, if we're good, 40 other people are going to be good.
100%.
Right? So it's like it really does start with us and then it goes out. So I don't know exactly what that looks like or what that structure is or what that support is, but I just feel like we just need to have the conversation because I think it's actually wild how little it's talked about.
Yeah.
Like I've looked around a lot. There's not that many people talking about the mental health of the mental health practitioners.
Yeah, exactly. And I really wanted to underscore the impact that mental health practitioners bring to our communities. As you said, if one mental health practitioner is good and they're doing a good job, then 40, 100, 10,000 other people are good throughout the year that they're working, right? Throughout their career. And we still misrepresent social workers. We still misrepresent psychologists and psychotherapists. We do not protect them enough. We do not create the financial structures that would provide them security over a long period of time, regardless of whether their clients can pay or not.
Exactly.
And especially right now when so many things are shifting around the world and it depends right now on a specific government in a specific country also a lot. We need the kind of a more global community, more global universal system that would support them throughout their journeys. For example, you moved from the US to Europe. I'm really curious about how you see the difference in the societal structure, in the communities that you see around yourself, how you feel here as the mental health practitioner and how you are rooting into your new country, new reality right now.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting question. Thank you. I think it's been really interesting. I think especially also sometimes people ask me if you hadn't studied psychology, what would you have studied? And I very quickly will say anthropology and linguistics. So it's one thing to have, all of us have these experiences of our home countries, right? But we have them from the time we're very small. So it's hard to filter out sometimes like what the moving to a new country as an adult, right? Yeah, and just so many just like nerd out surrounds. Oh, wow, that's so interesting. There's this thing that everyone just does, right? And they're like, oh. And then from the outside, you're like, they might be cultural. Like Portugal actually, and I say this all the time, has been like, and I know it's perfect. There's no nirvana, right? I'll sometimes jokingly be like, where there are people, there are challenges. Right? But there's a couple of things that they do here that have really been like healing for my social work soul. I think one of them is the decriminalization of the drug use and the impact they've seen that have on overdoses. Like, because it's just like, yeah, it doesn't work to shame people into recovery, put them in jail. Everybody knows this, but they're still doing it. And obviously the carceral system in the US is, anyway, I'll spare my soapbox, but it's a nightmare. So that's one thing that I think is pretty amazing here. And then like in terms of my settling it, yeah, I'm still trying to figure out where I fit and what like does and doesn't make sense professionally, and also how I can be of service here, because I know where I can be of service in the US. I don't want to just come in here and be like, this is the way, like it's like, no, that's not, like I'm a visitor. And so yeah, I've started it. I think something that's been helpful has been, I have a dear friend that's Portuguese and she's a psychologist, and so just like starting to have those conversations, and then also just being open, right? Just recognizing that, yeah, I'm not, yeah, again, I'm coming in from the outside, right? Which can be an advantage in some ways, right? Because you have sometimes clearer eyes, but you weren't born and raised here, so you're not going to understand everything. And maybe you have an idea and a Portuguese person's like, oh, it'll work. Didn't try, like we've tried that. So it's like it's the humility.
Yeah. Beautiful. This is also really refreshing to hear this perspective from an expat, from somebody who comes from a country where usually there is a lot of opinion, right? And a lot of like strong beliefs about how the world should work. And this is wonderful to have you speak about this so openly, because we need more humility when we're moving countries. And I'm also speaking for myself. That's my country number 6. And there is a lot of differences, a lot of nuance in every single culture, which is not necessarily right or wrong.
Right.
It's just what is. And when we move to a certain country, we need to, engage more humility in ourselves and observe, and without judgment. Just be present with what is and see how with our skill set, which is maybe different, influenced by different things, how can we help the people around us at this particular place?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also it's interesting too I forget sometimes the very different experience when you speak the native language of the place fluently. I'm hearing conversations and like being told things by people that not all of my friends who don't speak Portuguese are witnessing. So sometimes I'll say something, I'll realize, and someone else will be like, "What?" And I'll be like, "Oh, okay. That I know that because I'm having conversations with like a Brazilian person over here and like an Angolan person over here and like Portuguese person over here." So you also start to like, there's a richness that you're exposed to too. I think when you come in with just humility and open ears, people are like, "Oh, okay, like she wants to hear what I have to say," which is true. I do, because I don't know.
Totally.
Yeah.
In the current stage of your life, how do you see this dynamic around yourself and where you can potentially come in and help? I know that you're speaking with multiple different communities. What's your process right now to figure out how it is that you can be of service?
One thing I've thought about, and my mom is also here now too, both of my parents, and my mom was born here in Portugal and then moved to Brazil when she was 8. But was born to American parents, so she has quite this interesting cultural mix, and so she speaks Portuguese fluently as well. And she and I have had some chats about, I think it's a slight understatement to say there are some tensions happening here right now, mostly due to social issues, right? There's large groups of people coming in, the rent increases with not a salary increase, right? These are the things that, and Portuguese people, in my view of it, not really feeling taken care of, which is what leads to resentment and frustration, and completely understandably. And so my mom and I have had a couple of conversations, maybe trying to figure out how to like bridge those gaps a little bit between the local communities and the folk coming to live here. With the caveat of like people that are really intending to make this their home. Which there are though, right? I see friends taking Portuguese classes. I see friends right, like, but yeah, just some of the disconnects and just helping. Yeah, because my mom and I are not. It's like it feels like we're not quite expats and we're not quite Portuguese. Like we're somewhere like in the middle, and we have these different sort of cultural experiences. So yeah, that was a thought I've had a couple of times. It's just I don't know what exactly that would look like, but I can see how there's these divides that are happening that are based a lot on emotion and just like not really understanding each other maybe, or there's just like miscommunications. And then obviously, of course, there's the very real sort of people need to eat and be able to pay their rent. And that to me is also these are social work, social justice issue, right? So that's the beginning of an idea, but I've had that idea a couple of times.
It's beautiful. Yeah. Coming down as we started, right, from like a very big systemic issue that communities are isolated and they're not speaking with each other, literally or figuratively, right? Misunderstand each other in so many ways. How would you recommend, or what steps would you recommend us to do on a very personal, very grounding into individual somatic level?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the like what we talked, the hungry, angry, lonely, tired stuff, right? And which is easier said than done some days, right? Because we have responsibilities, we have work, life is busy. I would tell people maybe also to like try to find an entrance point that they already have. So what I mean by that is another thing that Portugal brought me is dance. Because I started dancing when I moved here. Latin dance, salsa, bachata, and also a little bit of kizomba because there's an amazing Angolan community here. So there's a lot of kizomba music and classes. And for me, because sometimes what I'll do, which is like sneaky, but like my friends, whatever, they know it at this point and they're still friends with me. I'll use dance to like educate a little, right? Because I'll be like, yeah, bachata originally comes from like the Dominican Republic. It wasn't created in Spain. And just connection points, right? Okay, you love Cuban salsa. Okay, maybe like look into what's happening in Cuba right now, which is like not so great. You know what I mean? Like, because to me, then it's like an entrance point of love, right? As opposed to an entrance point of, oh, this, I feel bad about this and like I have to do. No, let's honor. It's honoring. Honor where these dances come from. Let's honor the origins of them. Like they are joyful, they are fun, they are all of these things, but they come from part of what you're feeling is this like deep history. And so, yeah, and so I would say that too. Someone here loves Kizomba. I could just maybe try to connect in with the Angolan community a little bit because that is where this dance comes from. So that's, yeah.
Oh my God, I love this so much. It resonates with me also 100% because I love dancing.
Yeah.
And also, I see a lot of parallels with basically any practice that you're interested in, that you're borrowing from another culture,
Exactly.
like yoga, for example. And this is so important to reconnect with the roots and understand why exactly we're doing the things like we are.
Yeah.
And I find that as any practice, dancing, yoga, meditation, it's such a transferable skill.
Yes.
Because you're starting to learn about this other country and accept it as it is and observe it and respect it. And then you start naturally respecting, observing, and learning more about people and cultures that you live within, right? And they're around.
Exactly. And for people just thinking like, why are you here, right? What about Portugal called to you? What about this place makes you feel, what is it? And then can you translate that to like, this is what the Portuguese people have created. Right. So let me try to connect in. Let me talk to them about that. It's that kind of thing, right? Like find that thing, basically find your connection point and then lead from there, lead from love, right? And obviously also acknowledging our differences is important too. And that goes back to, okay, we've not had the exact same life experiences. You went through this and this. I didn't have to do it. All of that's important too. But I do think that when we're all trying to, which is, the reality is, and I feel this about the US right now too, is the reality is like, we're all trying to live in the same right? So we have two options. we can continue with like the distancing and or we can try to figure out how to connect in and tap in. But it's not as easy as all that, right? It's not as easy as that somatically. It's not as easy as that, right? But it's a process. We can start. We can try.
Yeah. And what is also really important for me to bring to the people is that when we think about the person who is in a very isolated state and who has very, for example, connections really limited to their country of origin and only one language they're speaking with these people, it may feel really difficult to come out of this because it needs a different language, it needs effort. The person might need some different social skills to actually come out of this challenge, start meeting someone new.
For sure.
But then the reward, even on a somatic level, is just so big when one is expanding and learning that their own shell is just that size. There's the whole world outside. And this rewarding feeling is something which enables our nervous system and gives us more energy to keep exploring further.
100%.
So just taking a small step already brings you very personal rewards. And of course, we're speaking about bigger systemic societal integration also, and the issues that we're all isolated, right? And that's why we see the impact on politics and how people are voting, etc. But at the same time, on a very personal level, one can be very selfishly much happier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then also, I think it's why sometimes people hear my mom was born here, right? And they think, oh, okay, like, Amalia learned Portuguese as a kid. No. No. I grew up, I'm always very honest. I grew up hearing her speak French, Portuguese, Spanish, and English, so like my comprehension level and all of those was fairly high, but we answered in English. Like we didn't speak in Portuguese, and my dad's American and they spoke English. So I feel, and I still tease her because I'm like, I couldn't have spoken one of those stocks. But in a sense, I feel grateful to have learned a second language as an adult. Like I started taking Portuguese classes when I was 18. I'm 36 now. So I spoke 3 words at 18. So, and now I'm not native, right? I'm never going to be native, but I'm fluent. And I tell people, I still remember being in Brazil and coming home at the end of the day with a level of exhaustion that I have never experienced. Of mentally, I'm just trying so hard to communicate all day. And that experience has been so formative for me because now I understand what that feels like, right? I understand. So it's like when people talk about immigrant, and obviously not the same thing at all as someone like leaving their country for really difficult reasons, or maybe because they didn't want to and they have to leave. But still, the experience of landing somewhere completely new, not speaking the language, and like the way you have to, yeah, it's a level of strength, I think. Not everyone under. It's just like, we're gonna, yeah, exactly. So yeah, so I think it's great when I see my friends that are living here trying to learn Portuguese, and I think it's really cool. I think there's this potential for that. I think Europeans, something I've realized is like, it's so usual to be in a group of people that are from like 10 different countries, right? Like people don't even think about it, but like, for an American, I'm like, this is amazing. I'm like, this is so cool. But that also what I've noticed is that with that, because it's so normal, the kind of like cultural miscommunicate is also super. And I'm like, wait, this is actually really challenging what everybody's doing on a daily basis, right? We're coming from 10 totally different lenses, and it's really cool, but it's also, this is work. So somatically and otherwise.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And so I'm so grateful that we have folks like you with so many different diverse backgrounds who can really empathize with the experience of an immigrant, experience of Black American therapist, experience of an expat learning the second language as an adult, etc., so that you can connect in all these different ways, even though you do not necessarily share the whole length and
personal experience.
yeah. And I find more and more that if even we have one thread of connection, then it's already connected.
Yeah, exactly.
This is it, and we can learn more about each other, but doesn't necessarily need to be the same background or the same country.
Yeah,
for me to feel safe next to you.
it's true. It's true. And then also I think it's important to name that like there are times, and this was something I also learned from learning from some of those Black American therapists, is like, then there are times that you just need to be around the people that have had the same experience as you and to feel safe. And that's amazing also. That's really important too. It just depends on what your nervous system needs that day. You know, I meet a person from New York and like, it's fun, right? It's the same sense of humor all of a sudden. It's like, right? So I think it's cool because there's space for all of it. I think there's really beautiful things we get from people that are different from us. And then there's really amazing things that happen when you're just like, wow, you're just looking out the exact same window.
Yeah.
So
100%. That's wonderful. What would be the one or maybe like three things that you want our listeners to come out with from this podcast?
But I guess just that like, and this is like so what I'm needing to work on still, right? But just that like, I guess a part of my 14 years as a therapist, right, which is wild. I don't know how that happened. Is like your messiness and your weirdness and your all these things that you think are the parts of yourself that make you not lovable, or like they're so beautiful. And like I think as a therapist, like obviously we have to hold boundaries, but there's just been so many moments throughout my career where I'm just like, you're so cute, right? The person's feeling just like total mess, and I'm like, I just love that humanness is beautiful. Your humanness is beautiful. And then what else? Yeah, I don't really know how another way to say this, but like, get to work. We need help. Like the activism and making a difference isn't and shouldn't be exclusive to those of us in these roles. And to be honest, we need people in every area right now. Like we need all hands on deck. Like we need everybody involved. So it's like, if you don't really know where to start, like, ask one of us. Like we probably have 7 ideas for you, and we probably need help. So that's and then the third thing would be like, age is nonsense. Like my dad, who's my role model for a lot of things, has always loved music. And I think maybe if he hadn't been like the second generation son of an Italian American, right? Like where it was like, you need a real job, right? probably would have been a musician or worked in music. And so at 60, he just was like, I'm gonna learn to play the drums. Yeah. And now he's performing with, it's very cute. Like, I think everyone else in the band, like, he's 73 and he's in a band. And like literally almost cried when we were at his concert because I just was like, I can tell that he's just like his dream. So that's the other thing is just start.
Amalia, thank you so much. I think this is such a wonderful point to finish our conversation for today. Where can people find you? How can people connect with you if they have more ideas and if they have two hands and two legs and maybe less of something, but they do have the desire to help?
Social Instagram right now is just my name. It might change because I'm working on some branding and some website stuff. Keep an eye on that. But right now it's just my name. It's all together, just Amalia Sirica at Instagram. And then that's also my email. So amalia.sirica@gmail. And yeah, and there's a lot of stuff in the works right now. If you're in Lisbon, I'm teaching yoga a couple of times a week. So you can come see me in person if you want to take a yoga class. But those are the main areas right now.
Yes. I will definitely come to yoga class. Looking forward to having this experience of practicing yoga with you as a trauma-informed social worker who has the wealth of experience and respect to all of our backgrounds and our bodies. And Amalia, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an amazing conversation where we covered the both individual impact of a person living in our systems and challenges that these systems create for us. We discussed what are specific steps that you can do on a daily basis to be better equipped to show up for all the various types of vulnerable communities. We also discussed how hard it is to be a therapist and what can be the potential and very tangible steps that would create the safer environments for mental health practitioners to provide their better services to the world and to heal these communities in the long run, and so much more. So thank you so much for everyone who tuned in with us today. Thank you again, Amalia, for your presence and your wonderful, vulnerable sharing with us. And looking forward to having you again sometime in the future, hopefully with more insights about how Portugal is treating you and how you see the communities around and how you're rooting down even further. Thanks, Sasha. Have a great day. Bye. Yay.